Hello, beautiful people, programmers, game developers, technologists, and the like. Welcome to another episode on Developing with Action Jake. Today we've got another special episode for you. We interview EvanMMO, who is the creator of a game called RetroMMO. Evan shares with us his story of getting into the technology industry. He started out at a coding boot camp at the age of 19 and eventually pivoted his way from a traditional programming role into a professional game developer role. Evan's project RetroMMO is one that was inspired by old titles such as Nostalgia, a turn-based online RPG. He has unfortunately since had to sign an NDA with his current company, but the project has been passed off into good hands and he hopes to resume work on it sometime soon. I hope you can enjoy this episode on Developing with Action Jake. Evan, welcome to the show, man. Excited to have you here. Excited to talk about you, your background, and what you're doing with RetroMMO. But before we get there, I did want to ask you about your education. So, I understand you're a boot camp guy, having attended Covalence. Can you tell me the story about what you were doing before the boot camp and what made you decide to attend one?
All right, yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on. Jake, right?
Jake, that's correct.
So, Covalence, yes. My original plan was actually to go the traditional computer science sort of routes. I think it was in high school, maybe like towards the end of middle school. I was just starting to think about like what are the things I would possibly want to do for career, because people are like constantly pressuring you to think about that sort of thing. Like, what are you going to major in? And I was just thinking like, well, I play games and I'm pretty good at math and like logic problems and stuff. So coding seems like something that would make sense to give a shot. I took a Java class senior year of high school, and I was like, oh, this is pretty fun. It's more fun than any other class I've ever taken, so I'll just go with this. And I was thinking kind of in the back of my head, like, hopefully maybe I'll be able to take that into game development since I like games, but whatever. Um, and yeah, I went to college for like a small portion of a semester, and I just wasn't going well. There was like life stuff getting in the way, so I took a step back for a couple of months and wasn't doing any school. And then I had like a family friend, a friend of my parents. Uh, they were, I guess, recommending like, hey, show this to Evan. They could go to this boot camp and spend 3 months and learn what he needs to know and spend a whole lot less money. And yeah, instead of the 4-year college degree thing, if he wants to consider it. And that family friend actually was someone who worked at a company that was directly hiring people out of Covalence sometimes. So he was also thrown on there like, hey, I might be able to just get him a job if you send him there. Really. So it was kind of enticing. So yeah, I was just like, screw it. Let's just give this a try. I mean, I knew going into it that the boot camp thing is more it's better for people that are more like hands-on learners and don't really like to read in like the classroom setting as much, that's definitely me. I was cool with that, so a shot, and yeah, I think it worked out really well. I'm glad I went that route.
No, totally. And I know it can be like intimidating because it's like, I feel like the educational boot camp route is still like relatively new. And we're so conditioned to be like, oh, I need a 4-year degree. Like, I got to go get my computer science degree. So it's nice that you had those family friends to kind of guide you in that direction. And I that is kind of a question I have is, if someone were to take a similar route, like what advice would you give them starting a career in tech? You could talk about maybe 4-year degree path versus the boot camp path or whatever.
Sure, yeah, I talk about this on my stream a lot as well. The boot camp actually sponsors me, but I always tell people like it's not for everyone. There's definitely a lot of people that are going to
Right.
just be too overwhelmed, and it's going to be too fast paced, and it's going to be too hands on and too like not holding your hands, and maybe you just flourish more in like a classroom setting. So that's definitely a thing. There's a lot of people that I know that I would not have recommended them to go to a boot camp. So I'd say, the first most important thing is understanding what kind of learner you are, and I guess
Mhm.
also, understanding if you're going to a boot camp. They're typically web dev focused. I'm sure there's others, but it's the most common formula I see is like a couple months long or a few months long, and it's like full stack web development. So
Mhm.
just know as well, if you're going that route, that your first job that you get is probably going to be some sort of either like front end thing or maybe like a full stack thing. But it's like, for example, my first job was working at a marketing agency. It was a very small marketing agency, and they just were willing to take a chance on someone that could like do a lot of work for not a lot of money. It's really hard to like get a job at like a large company, I'd
Mhm.
say probably fresh out of a boot camp. It's fine, because you'll be able to move into what you want. But I guess you're probably more likely to get closer to what you want directly out of college than directly out of the boot camp. But the thing is, as well, I go to a 3-month boot camp, and I can spend the next 3 years of my career, working towards that while my peers are still in college. So it's like, yeah, it took me years of working to start getting into jobs that I actually liked, but it took my friends years to graduate school. So yeah, whatever, however you value that.
No, totally. And I think that's a good perspective. It's like, don't expect to be getting a job at a Google or Apple out of one of these programs. Now, people do it all the time, but if you have that kind of like, you know what, I'll take what I can get and then I can pivot upwards in within my career when the time's right. That's definitely what I did. I don't know if I told you that, but I also went the coding boot camp route. Got
Oh,
it.
cool. I
I,
didn't
I
know.
I did get a 4 year degree, but I got a degree in economics, and then I realized I didn't want to be a business analyst at some company, so I wanted to code. So I literally, soon after I graduated, I joined a coding boot camp, and literally to this day, one of the best decisions I've ever made because it's such a good career path for me. And I recommend it to other people all the time, especially people that are, graduating high school and are, maybe considering not going to college. But again, it's such a it's such a new kind of the alternative educational path is so new to us that it's scary doing that. So hearing your story and hearing your success through it, I think is super powerful for other people to hear. Um, and in that vein, I want to come back to that, but I am curious what sparked your interest in game dev, and is your interest in game dev ultimately what inspired you to get to attend a boot camp?
So I mean, yeah, the game dev thing partially, or the game dev thing partially did push me towards wanting to do programming. I guess
Okay.
just because as a kid, growing up, just playing games all the time, like I've just
Mm-hmm.
been spending a unhealthy amount of my free time playing video games since I was like 6 years old. And I think everybody that plays games at one point thinks just like, oh wow, that must be cool to make games, even if you don't have any idea what goes into it. So yeah, I definitely had that aspect of it. And then right, yeah, when I started actually learn coding a bit and realized, oh, I'm pretty good at this, picking this up pretty well, then I was like, oh, well, that was like kind of a pipe dream, I guess, because I knew it, or not a pipe dream in the sense that I thought it was unachievable, but I knew it'd
Mm-hmm.
be a long path to move from web dev to that. There was one other piece that I guess sort of made me be really interested in game dev, which was one particular game I played in high school, and yeah, this sort of connects to my MMO that I guess we'll probably be chatting a lot
Mm-hmm.
more about later. But I played this game in high school that was like a turn-based JRPG MMO sort of thing. It looked like an NES game, but in the format of like World of Warcraft, where you group up and go do stuff, in parties, which I am also making a game like that now. And I had dreams of making that game even since before I was knowing how to program, because I was very sad that that game died out. Nostalgia was the title. NES Nostalgia, like a play on words.
Okay. Haven't heard
Um,
of it.
I put thousands of hours into it in high school. It's very niche, very like like cult community.
Okay.
It had like a couple times that it really blew up on YouTube and like articles, but never anything too crazy. And the dev just kind of disappeared. So I was like, oh man, me and all my friends want to play a game like this. Man. Kind of thinking in the back of my head, even throughout the boot camp, I was asking my instructors like questions about like, well, how do you begin even begin to use to like make multiplayer games in the browser? And I was just the whole time I was going through the course, I'm thinking like, well, hmm, this platform to maybe make this game. So yeah, that was a big part of it, I guess.
So, can you talk a little bit more about that? You were talking to the TAs and instructors at your boot camp. You're asking them like, "Hey, I want to build a game like this. Like, where do I start?" Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much, yeah, just casually, just going back and forth about this sort of thing. And yeah, they tell me stuff like, oh, check out Socket.io. Like, oh, I made a chat app with this one time. You can use this to have multiple connections and
Cool.
do stuff in real time. Or they'd say like, oh, you look into go Google Canvas 2D. That's a
Mm.
way that you can draw graphics in a way similar to like other programming languages that you use for games. So yeah, that was my initial foundation for this was like, okay, let's just Google Socket.io Canvas games and just try and find any info I have. Yeah, I was making like little like crappy baby attempts at making this game long before I like got a game dev job at all or like I remember even in high school when I had just taken the one computer science class, I was like watching videos about Java, like how to make like an MMO in Java, and I didn't get very far at all. But so yeah, it was always there for sure.
Okay, well, perfect. This does roll in my next question. So the question is, what made you decide to use TypeScript for retro MMO, and were you considering using game engines like Unity, Godot, Unreal, etc.?
Mm. Well, really the only reason was it was just because we learned TypeScript at Covalence at the boot camp. So I guess my brain just went to, okay, here is the thing I know.
Yeah.
So if I want to make a game, I have to learn how to make it with the thing I know. I mean, when it comes to making a game that's in the style of like a NES game, like a game from the 80s, I guess I just kind of assumed probably anything is powerful enough to do it. So I guess it never crossed my mind the idea of maybe TypeScript isn't good enough. When in terms of game engines, I don't think I even understood what a game engine was back then. I think I had heard of Unity or things like this, but I didn't fully understand what their role is and how they made making games easier. And by the time that I did have a proper understanding, it was years later, and I had already put a good amount of effort into building my own tech in TypeScript, so it wouldn't really have made sense to start over at that point. Or maybe it would have, I don't know. But I think for a game that the most complex part is the networking
Hmm.
and the actual gameplay itself is really simple. You know, we're talking about like a Final Fantasy or like Dragon Quest style game, Pokemon, whatever. When the gameplay is so simple, but the networking is the hard part, I think those are the types of games that benefit the least from a game engine.
I actually think you're right. And then you have this bloat of a game engine to like do something simple, and then it's not fun. I think, something I think so important is that the project you're working on is fun. And if that means you're going like a harder route because you're building a custom engine or whatever, who cares? Like, you're doing it for fun, for learning. You're growing a community while doing it. So people support that endeavor. Um, that's actually super interesting because I'm also working on a custom engine, also written in TypeScript, but it was in a similar way. It was always made for like really simple games. Like, I'm not doing anything fancy. I don't have a crazy physics layer that I'm reinventing the wheel to you know implement gravity, which Unity and all those game engines do such a good job of. Um, but anyway, I think that's so interesting because I also haven't found many people doing this specifically with TypeScript. You see a lot with JavaScript, and TypeScript's started to blow up. I'm glad Covalence was teaching y'all TypeScript because it's I think it's an amazing language. Yeah, man. I'm also curious. Were you as like when you're younger? Do you remember that the Action Script Flash player days, right? Like
Oh
Newgrounds.com.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I never coded in
Okay.
Flash stuff, but I played a ton of Flash games as a kid. Yeah, I love Newgrounds. Yeah,
Okay.
it's the greatest.
Cool. No, the only reason I ask is because I that's how I got my start, like 8 years old, making like ActionScript games. And ActionScript is actually built with the same standard as JavaScript and TypeScript.
Hmm.
So it was a very easy transition to the JavaScript world. But anyway, I think that's super interesting. It's super cool you're doing that. So you mentioned about some of the influences. Tell me, what are some of your favorite games, and what exactly are the games that inspired retro MMO?
Well, I got Pokemon like Gen 3 Pokemon, like Ruby and Sapphire, and then like the Red and Blue remakes, Fire Red, Leaf Green. I had those on the Game Boy Advance when I
Mm-hmm.
was 6 years old or so, and I played the hell out of those. Like I don't know if there's any other game that I played more back then than those games. I know they were popular at school too with friends, so that's what introduced me to the turn-based combat thing and got super hooked on it. And then kind of, like later in elementary school, kind of fell off that stuff a bit. But then when I was in high school, I started getting just back into retro games a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. Maybe just like from YouTube. I think that sort of thing, like watching Let's Plays and
Mm-hmm.
watching reviews of old games, maybe got me more interested in that, and like got me into like retro game collecting. So I'd go to like thrift stores and stuff in high school and try to find old stuff, and I just thought it was so cool. I don't know why. I mean, I guess it just feels cool to have an old game in your hand. But like I was never into emulation. I just always thought it felt so cool to like have physical hardware for old
Mm-hmm.
games and collect them and stuff. And I play and in that period I played some other turn-based RPGs like some of the old Final Fantasy games and stuff. I think it was around that same time that I found nostalgia as well.
Mm-hmm.
It was like probably early high school, like 13 or 14. And then yeah, like I said, when nostalgia died, I was like, oh man, the greatest MMO ever is gone. I gotta fill the
Mm-hmm.
fill the space. That's
Fill the void.
pretty much it. Yeah.
Oh man. So are you not into like the modern RPGs, like the Final Fantasy VII remake?
Uh, I haven't played that one. No.
No.
I mean, I play some modern game. I mean, I was playing the Diablo 4 beta
Yeah.
past couple weekends. So I mean, I check out some new stuff. I remember I played Final Fantasy 13 when it came out. I wasn't so into it. Didn't check out 15 either. Yeah, I guess I just haven't checked out a lot of. I mean, I don't know. I played Skyrim. I'll probably whatever the next Bethesda game, next Elder Scrolls game or like Starfield or whatever. I'll give it a try. I haven't I had like a really decent computer setup for a while, and I just recently got like a really solid, like powerful desktop setup. So I'll be looking more into playing new stuff. I actually like Diablo 4 was my motivation for getting set up with that.
Upgrading the PC. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I used to play a lot of Hearthstone as well, as far as like, turn-based RPG-esque type of games go.
Totally.
And I was like way into Hearth. I don't know if there's any game I've played more than Hearthstone. Maybe RuneScape.
Oh, dude, I was a RuneScape player back in the day. But turn-based games that's your kind of game, right? Like
I
you,
guess so. I guess
yeah.
there's just something about it because like both Hearthstone and Nostalgia, I was just like hooked. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like competitive, like I wanted to like when I played Nostalgia, like I wanted to be the best. Like I wanted to solo the bosses and like record it and post it and like brag to people and like or like Hearthstone is like I was always trying to get legend rank and stuff. So I don't know, I guess I just like that sort of gameplay.
Well, dude, so you alluded to this a little bit, talking about retro MMO. Like, what sets retro MMO apart from other MMOs, and why do you feel this game had to be made?
Yeah, I mean, I guess surprisingly, just nobody's doing that exact
Mm-hmm.
formula.
Mm-hmm.
It's
And that formula being what exactly?
I mean, essentially Final Fantasy 1, but multiplayer, but
Mm-hmm.
MMO.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, Square Enix could just put like a 10 to 20 person team on it and like blow me out of the water and probably do way better. But I guess, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've seen like Final Fantasy and like Dragon Quest fan games doing the same sort of thing. But aside from nostalgia and my game, I've never seen someone actually like go at it from the original sort of perspective. Well, there's actually, it's funny actually, since I've started making RetroMMO, there's a couple people that have been inspired by me to make a similar format sort of game. But yeah, it's just it feels like an untapped formula for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe we'll see more in the future.
I mean, I will say this. I feel like, and maybe it's the publishers doing this or the big game developers, but it seems like the direction is moving towards, action combat. We see the Final Fantasy VII remake, no longer turn based. So I feel like there's this just push where it's like people like quick, slick animations and all that. And like, it's almost like they feel we've evolved from the turn based genre, but Pokemon is always going to come. Pokemon's going to be turn based, right? Forever. And
Yeah.
so it's still around. It is, but it is interesting. We don't really see MMOs like that besides nostalgia, which isn't here any longer.
Yeah.
Um,
It's very niche. It's
very
very
niche.
niche. There was actually a Tim as well. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It was
I
like a poke
have.
like a 3D game. That's probably the closest thing to my game as far as like companies with funding putting something into it.
Okay.
And yeah, I think I don't know how they're doing financially, but it seemed like it was pretty popular for a while. I guess I haven't heard about that game in a minute.
No, and it's still getting updates. I think they're doing pretty well. I never played it, but I had a friend who got into it. It's like that's the kind of game people want. We want a Pokemon game that everyone can play together. So, okay, we're back. Had a little bit of connection issues there, but no worries. So the question I was asking was, I hear that your involvement with RetroMMO has paused for the time being. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yep. So I accepted a job at City State Entertainments
Mm-hmm.
about a month a half, or I started about a month and a half ago. And they're working on an MMO called Camelot Unchained, and they've
Mm-hmm.
got a sort of non-compete thing going on where they don't want me working on Retro MMO at the same time as I'm working on their game. At least for the first year, they said they'd be willing to revisit later on, and I guess they've made similar exceptions for employees in the past. But because I'm brand new, and I guess also because they're kind of taking a chance on me in the sense that I'm one of the least experienced people at the
Mm-hmm.
company, probably.
Mm-hmm.
I need to, I guess maybe prove my value first. Because they're not worried about me as a serious competitor in terms of like financially, like my MMO actually competing with theirs, but more so that if I'm going to be split between, my focus is going to be split between two projects, they're worried that that's going to get in the way, and I can say all day long like, oh no, it won't get in the way, I'll do great. I guess
Mm-hmm.
they just want to see some proven, they want to see some proven, they want to see some results first.
No, that makes a lot of sense, especially being new. Like you don't want your attention going to retro MMO, and they're like, wait, why aren't you doing any work for us?
Yeah,
uh,
well, it's like, the game blows up in the middle of the day, or like something crazy happens, I'm gonna feel pressured to neglect my day job for sure. So,
that makes sense, but retro MMO is not going anywhere, right? You have other people that are taking over,
kind of. Well, I mean,
kind
it's
of.
definitely not going anywhere, but in the sense of someone else taking over, kind of. So I'm still hosting the game in its state right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like it's not going anywhere. They don't mind if I host it. They just don't want me actively releasing updates or, programming stuff for it. So that's just going to be hosted, and it's, not that there's much reason to play the game
Mm-hmm.
since there's not much being added to it. But a friend of mine, someone that's worked on me with Retro MMO a lot. I used to contract him to do some programming
Mm-hmm.
for Retro MMO, just like little features and bug fixes and stuff here and there. I gave him a copy of my code and was like, "Hey man, just go make a private server, and you can just keep all the money you make from it, like sell your subscriptions or whatever. But just it's like something to keep something to keep the community entertained.
Totally.
And or yeah, I like gave him some. I gave him like a year's worth of operation costs. Like I gave him money to like cover hosting and stuff for a year. So the idea is that he sort of keeps people happy for a while, and then when I come back and I'm able to work on my game again, uh, we'll build like an integration between our two games where maybe some of the stuff that you earned in his game gets transferred over, and then eventually his game will be retired, and we'll move some of the content over as well. So like let's say, he designs dungeons and bosses and things. We'll integrate his work with RetroMMO and eventually just retire his private server version of it entirely. And hopefully he's able to make some cash with the game subs. We have like an optional game subscription model where you pay $5 a month for some extra things, not like pay to win type of stuff, but just like more bank space, more character slots, that type of thing.
Totally. No, that's a solid model. I think players respect that model. It's done well for RuneScape for sure. Dude, so that's exciting. So are you able to like consult at a high level with what he's doing, or you really got to be hands off? Maybe you can't talk about it.
I mean, I've got to be as hands off as possible. The reason
mm-hmm.
that I didn't want to just have him work on RetroMMO itself, the reason that it had to be a private server, is because I wouldn't be if he was like touching my game and I wasn't allowed to consult or do anything, like I'd be losing my mind. That game's like my child, and I don't I want to have the final say on everything. So that was kind of the reason that I wasn't open to just having him take it over and more doing like a clone sort of thing, is that I'll actually be able to like not go crazy. I mean, like, yeah, in terms of console, I mean, like, yeah, he DMs me and asks me a question, sure, whatever. I mean, I'll play the game, I'll stream playing his game, and I'll give feedback and stuff. But I gotta be as hands off as possible. And yeah, no, I can't really help so much whatsoever. But my company also expressed to me, like they're not Big Brother. They're not gonna be in my DMs. They're not where like, at the end of the day, if I'm getting my work done and I'm not streaming, coding, working on the game, they're not gonna go crazy like trying to catch me on dumb shit like, oh, you answered a DM from him about like he was asking you about a code question. But I think but my friend that's his username is Frulu. My friend that's doing this private server, he understands that I'm trying to set the boundary as hard as possible. So he's probably also just not even gonna bug me with stuff too much and kind of just do it on his own. I'm sure he'll he's expressed that he appreciates my feedback and that he's excited for me to play. It's actually not up yet. It's going up any day now. He's been working on it for maybe like a month or two. I mean, about as long as I knew that I was getting this job. But yeah, I'm gonna be playing it day one, and I'm gonna let loose. If it's got bad stuff, I'm gonna be honest.
Heck yeah. So is it? I'm guessing it's under a different name too, not RetroMMO.
Yeah, he's calling it Retro Gaiden, which
Retro
Gaiden,
Gaiden.
I guess, Gaiden means like a side story, or it's like another word for like a spin-off sort of thing. I didn't know. The only time I had ever heard of that was like Ninja Gaiden, like the
Man, you learn something
yeah.
every day. Well, hey, we want Retro Gaiden to do well, right? Because when Retro MMO comes back, we will take the player base.
Oh yeah. Well, then there also the thing is like the only reason I made RetroMMO in the first place is that I was sad that Nostalgia wasn't getting updates anymore. So if he just goes and makes Retro Gaiden really awesome and adds a bunch of content, I'll just be like, screw it. I don't even need to come back. I'll just play your game all day. I'll just stream playing your game 10 hours a day. Forget
Yeah,
about
exactly. You just care that the game exists, not necessarily that you
it.
build it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I exaggerate because like that was the that like I'm being honest about the original motivation, but now that I have a taste of game development and have been doing this in my free time for 3 years, like now I've developed that actual interest and that satisfaction of creating a game world. So realistically, I'm going to come back to the game no matter what because that. But I guess let's say I worked at City State Entertainment for a year. A year goes by, and I say, "Oh, hey, let's revisit this," because you said that you'd be willing to revisit this after a year. And they say, "Okay, let's revisit it." And then they're like, "We still don't want you to go back to it. Let's give it another year." Um, if Retro Gaiden wasn't like if Frulu was really busy and not doing a lot with it, and not much was happening with it, then I might be thinking like, oh, maybe I should start looking for new jobs. But if Retro Gaiden is flourishing and it's awesome, then I'd be like, maybe just give it another year. I
Mhm.
don't know. So it definitely is a factor. And I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, I just want to play the game.
Yeah, totally. Well, you already mentioned it, so I did have this question. I do want to hear more about City State Entertainment and your new role as a UI engineer, right? That's the
That's
role.
right, yeah.
Okay.
A
So,
junior UI engineer.
junior UI engineer on Camelot Unchained is the game, which I know about this
That's
game
right.
because it's been in development for a very long time.
It is.
Um,
It has 10 years.
so, can you tell us about that? And also, as a tack on, was it always your goal to get a job in game development? Because we talked a little bit about that. You did the educational boot camp. You kind of had your first web dev role, and then you always want to parlay that into an actual game development role, or yeah, just tell me your thoughts.
So it's always been in the back of my mind,
Mm-hmm.
trying to work towards a professional game dev role, but it was never something that I was really actively working towards. I mean, yeah, it's been in the back of my mind since I first got the interest in programming, because that was part of the reason for considering programming. Was like, oh man, I play video
Yeah,
games. That could be a
totally.
cool thing. But once I got into the software dev industry and, like talking to other devs and stuff, I started to realize like, oh, game dev jobs pay worse than software dev jobs. They have more crunch. They have,
Mm-hmm.
worse hours. They generally seem to have, especially when it comes to MMO companies, company culture is a common issue. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
look at companies like Blizzard, World of Warcraft, or like Cloud Imperium, like Star Citizen.
Mm-hmm.
These are some of the top dogs, and then you go look up the salaries that they get, and you go look up the Glassdoor reviews, and it's like, God damn, dude, I don't want to work
Yeah.
there. So I was, and I'm very fulfilled by the indie game dev that I do. So
Mm-hmm.
the way that I was sort of looking at it, maybe like 2, 3 years in my dev career, I was like, well, as long as I get to do my indie game dev stuff in my free time, I don't care if it's a boring software dev job. I don't care if I'm working at a bank or a fintech company or it's something equally boring.
Yep.
As long as it's a good work-life balance and I'm fulfilled in my free time, that's fine. But yeah, and I've had two game dev jobs now. I have this one, City State, and then previously to this, I was working on slot machine games.
Mm-hmm.
And both of these jobs just sort of came to be in neither of them were jobs that I like went and sent in resumes to. The slot machine game company was like the team lead was someone who watched my stream, so he just hit me up in Discord DMs was like, "Hey, would you be interested in this?"
That's cool.
And that worked out because the pay was better than what I had, and I that guy seemed like a cool guy, so I figured that the crunch and all that stuff wouldn't be so bad. So that was a unique case where it's like, well, this is, but if that job had paid less than myself, I don't know that I would have accepted worse working conditions just to
Mm-hmm.
work on games. And in the same case with City State Entertainment, it was a recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn. I think they just found me because I have RetroMMO listed on my LinkedIn, and the recruiter was like, "Oh, they'll love this. Like he's a passionate MMO guy, so they'll want to hire them." And it turns out City State Entertainment is one of the, as far as like MMO companies go and game dev companies go, they have some of the best work-life balance, and
Mm.
the company culture is just great. And like the recruiter was touting this, and I guess you don't really know how true that is until you start. But I mean, 1.5 months in, it's really good so far. It seems like they've followed through on that, and the pay is better than what I had before. So I was like, man, you're reaching out to me, talking about better pay, talking to me about like they're extremely anti-crunch and pro work-life balance, and I get to work with all these like game dev industry
Mm-hmm.
vets that can like mentor me, and it's just like the perfect opportunity just sort of showed up. So I was like, yeah, hell yes, sign me up. So
Cool.
yeah, I was very excited. This is definitely, I've had maybe like 4 or 5 software dev jobs over the 5 years that I've been doing this, and yeah, this is by far the one that I've been the most happy with.
Cool. No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, a lot of people get into programming because, like, hey, I like video games and I want to program games. But then it's like, okay, yeah, they hear about the game industry working conditions, like whatever. I can make a lot more money doing a fintech dev job than going to work for Blizzard or Activision, you know?
Yeah.
But I know that's a story in the industry that it's shitty working conditions and shitty pay and all that, but that's not always the case. It's just I feel like it's like you hear about the worst, you know. I've also heard about really good companies to work for that are bigger. Like I hear good things about like Riot, for example.
Oh yeah.
and other game developers, but not to go into that too much. So that I mean that's super interesting. I mean you bring up your story about really it's like and okay, so this was the follow up question. You would have been just as happy if you were doing a regular software dev job and then doing retro MMO on the side, but this is such a good opportunity that it's like okay, I'll take this job and I can table retro MMO because this opportunity is just so good, right?
I mean, yeah, I'll take if we're talking, same price point, same
Mm.
work-life balance, I'll definitely choose the MMO dev company over the
Okay.
fintech company.
Yeah, totally.
But I do value the work-life balance
Hmm.
a lot more than I value the work being interesting because I already have work that's interesting in my free time. Yeah.
Dude, that I mean that's so similar with my current game. I mean, I do like the role that I have now, but it's not games. And I get that fulfillment of doing the game development on my own project. So I really resonate with what you're
Yeah.
sharing. Dude, just for my own interest, I'm curious about as a junior engineer there, what are you doing? Is it are they using Unity, Unreal? And you're doing like UI engineering with those tools, or is it their own custom engine, or can you even talk about it?
I think it's okay for
Yep.
me to talk because just listed on the job applications publicly. Anyway, the tech stack sort of thing. Anything that's been publicly posted is fine for me to talk about. So yeah, they do have a custom engine. Have a custom C++ engine,
Okay.
but they also have a UI layer that's React. And there's communication between the C++ side and the TypeScript side. So like 99% of my job, at least for now, is just building out features for the Camelot Unchained UI in TypeScript React. Um, I already have done a little bit of work on the C++ code because sometimes it comes about, it's like, oh, hey, we need you to add this new feature to the UI, but the C++ client isn't exposing the data that you need to be able to render this or to be able to do this thing. So I go in the C++ code and I put in a little pull request that exposes whatever thing I need, maybe has a little bit of logic. So that's pretty cool because I've never worked with C++ before.
Mm-hmm.
I've never worked with a language nearly that low level before. I've done mostly TypeScript. I've done a little bit of C# at a job before, a little bit of PHP, a little bit of Python. So being able to just like dig into C++ and learn from these people that are like plus plus wizards building their whole like 3D massively multiplayer engine is really cool. But it's also cool that the I get to do the TypeScript React stuff as my main grind because it's nice to have the main thing that you do be something that you're pretty comfortable in and just only step out a bit as like a smaller person. So I'm pretty happy with the day to day and the I do know that eventually they will probably want to move me more into doing like a lot of UI work that needs to do now. There's a lot of UI work that's already planned and designed that needs
Mm-hmm.
implementation. But a year from now, that might be the case. A year from now, it might be like, hey, we benefit from you doing a little bit of like client-side gameplay programming sort of stuff. I don't know. And that's one of the things that they were looking for when they were interviewing as well. Is like, is this person willing to, uh, how much do they care about the full process? And it's very from pitch that I care about the whole process because I made my own MMO and I do all the full stack stuff. So it's a good
Totally.
fit.
Dude, that is a super exciting role. So you're doing so it's a custom TypeScript React layer. Like are they actually pulling in React or they have their own React like layer, do you know? Okay, a little bit more connection issues, but we're back at it. So the follow-up question I had was I was just curious about their TypeScript React layer. Is it actually React that they pulled in or is it like a React like layer that they've custom built?
Yeah, we're using actual React. Um, Pretty vanilla, not using any other frameworks on top of it, anything like that. It was very easy for me to get into it. The learning
Nice.
curve for the React stuff was not tough at all. It's
N-
cool. They have
nice.
like they use a library. They use like a C++ library that allows, I guess, just like binding of like HTML instances like Chromium or whatever to
Hmm.
specific elements in the engine. So one of those things could just be like a straight like 2D layer just like on top of the whole screen, but then you might also have something that's like tied to a player, like a little like a nameplate or something like that. But all that stuff is I haven't had to learn any of that yet. Like I mean, they're starting me off easy too, right?
Hmm.
Like the my first task was like implement the settings menu, like that type of thing. It's like okay, it's like yeah, I gotta learn your system, but it's nothing too out of the box.
Interesting. And I know we're getting technical here, but I'm curious. Do they have like a Redux like layer on top of it for application state context management? Or
Yeah, we just use Redux.
oh, you actually use Redux. Okay. That's super interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard of like a custom engine using actual React and Redux on top of it. So, super fascinating. I mean, that's a great way to get into that position. And then, like you say, like in a year, they're probably going to be shifting you over more and more towards C++ stuff, right? Um,
Maybe, yeah. I just told you, I was like, wherever you want me,
mm,
I'm cool. That was pretty much what I said. I'm interested in all of it, and I'm creatively fulfilled by my stuff I do in my free time.
yeah,
Put me wherever. But I was like, starting me in UI is definitely the best place. That's starting somewhere comfortable is great, but hey man, whatever you got to do.
super cool, dude. Super cool. Okay, so one of the last questions I had for you was, can you share any health tips for game developers, programmers, and any other creatives who spend a lot of time doing work at their computers? Like, what do you do? Keep yourself
Oh yeah.
healthy.
Yeah, when you sent me some of these questions ahead of time, I was reading through and I was like, that was the one that I was like, man, I am not the guy to ask. I mean, it's obviously I just anytime I get out of the house, do something outdoors, I just view that as a big victory because I work from home. Most I'm maybe everybody at City State Entertainment does. So it's like, I work 8 hours for my day job and I stream all night and it's tough. I'm lucky because I have a kid. I have a 2-year-old
Hmm.
who actually, desires to go to the playground and the park and stuff, so that gets me out of the house. But uh yeah, I guess just make it part of your schedule maybe. Push yourself to be active. I'm not doing a good job of that. I need to do better.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. I thought maybe if you had tips for us, since you've been in the industry 5 years now, I know what it's like because I have one of these gaming chairs, but over here I also have a Swiss ball. So I switch out between my gaming chair and my Swiss ball because I just can't sit here 8 hours a day. It's not good for me, you know?
Yeah.
But
That's one
anyway.
of the things I miss that's like the main thing I miss about working somewhere in person is just
Mm,
like the walk in the morning. I remember my last job I had before I went to like remote stuff was I had to park like 10 minutes away or something and it's like, "Oh man, this walk is saving my life, getting some physical activity."
yeah, man, we miss those things. And then you walk from office to office, meeting with your coworkers and commingling, and you don't think about the extra energy you're burning and exercise in a sense. It is there's pros and cons, right, to remote life versus at the office. Um, we'll do the lot.
Yeah. Yeah. The pros outweigh the cons for me, but yeah, sure.
Well, the last question I had for you was, where can people find you?
Oh, sure. So I post YouTube videos. I have a at RetroMMO is
Mm-hmm.
like my business casual account where
Mm-hmm.
I post devlogs and do my own interviews with people, and then I have my at EvanMMO account on YouTube, just like highlights from my stream. I stream on Twitch a ton,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous amount for someone that has a full-time job. Twitch.tv/EvanMMO. And as far as my games, go to my itch page, or you can go to just evanmmo.com. Actually, I made like a little portfolio thing recently. It's not really a portfolio. It's more like a glorified sort of link tree
Mm-hmm.
sort of deal. But yeah, I've got the MMO game that I'm not working on, but I also publish stuff on the side, some from time to time, like game jams or like smaller scale stuff. I'm still allowed to do that at this job, so I didn't have to quit the indie dev entirely, just the MMO. So
Right on. Nice.
yeah.
Okay. Well,
You
I'll
can find me
link.
on Newgrounds, Evan MMO on Newgrounds. You mentioned that earlier.
Perfect. I'll link. I'll link it all in the description. And man, dude, I'm a huge
You
game.
can link one of them.
I'm a huge game jammer, by the way. Do you do Ludum Dare or
I
no?
haven't. Well,
Yeah.
my issue is that I don't know any popular game engines. I actually want to get into learning Godot now that I'm like not working on the MMO. I'm thinking like, oh, maybe I learn Godot and I can do more game jam stuff. But like for me, like right now because I've done game jams just making games from scratch in TypeScript. You can't do a Ludum Dare like making games or maybe you can if you got your own custom engine. But I've done two game jams. The content creator Ludwig,
Yeah, yeah. That just
he
happened, right?
yeah, there was one just last month, and then there was
Mm-hmm.
another one of those like a year and a half ago, and I did both of them. Those are the only two game jams I've done. I have a friend who's like a fan of him, or used to be a fan of him,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, she invited me and a couple friends to do it whenever they did it a year and a half ago, and then it happened again this time, and I was like, oh, let's do it again. But that's a 10-day game jam,
Yeah,
so like that was more realistic for me.
that's a grind though. 10 days, my gosh, because I just do the 72-hour jams, and we're trying to put in like 12-hour days, and
Yeah,
I'm not doing that for 10 days straight. Um, but dude, Godot is a great engine, and Godot 4.0 just released, and it has a bunch of quality of life improvements. A lot of my friends are actually currently switching from Unity to Godot, so it's also free and open source. You don't need to pay any royalties for using it. It's like the
hmm
perfect game engine, honestly, right now, in my opinion. But
that's part of the major appeal for me. Free open source, and then the fact that the 2D support is a little bit easier to get into than maybe Unity, where it's like
totally,
kind of 3D, but kind of not. And yeah, hopping in on Godot 4, it seems like a good time. It still feels like they're kind of ironing out some of the kinks.
they are.
People in my Twitch chat and stuff have been telling me like, hey man, it's jank. I don't know. So I've been kind of like pushing it off. Like maybe I'll get started next month. Maybe I'll start it the month after that. But it's probably the path I'll go. And then yeah, maybe I'll be doing some real game jams like
Yeah,
Ludum Dare. It's
heck yeah,
nice to be
man.
able to compartmentalize it into a weekend for sure, because like it doesn't screw up your whole life for 10 days. Because my life, I was dying by the end of that 10-day jam. Like my work was suffering, my personal life, but it was fun though.
Heck yeah, man. Well, dude, this has been an amazing talk. I appreciate your time. And I appreciate everyone listening. We will talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks.